It'll include the NHS. When he spoke to you, he said, actually, the NHS wouldn't be on the table. I mean, next time he mentions it, might be back on the table. It's hard to know.
Well, I think something happened between the time that press conference finished and he walked with Theresa May about 50 yards down to the Churchill War Rooms, where I was, waiting to do an interview with him, and they clearly had a conversation. I think it was explained to him, look, this isn't just playing badly with Labour on the left, which he wouldn't care about. It's playing very badly with the Conservatives here, particularly the leaders or people who are trying to be the new leader of the party, makes their lives very difficult.
But what should people believe, given he changed his mind in the space of, what, a day?
Donald Trump's a business guy, so he wants to do... You know, he considers himself half British. His mum was raised in Scotland until she was 18, and he is a businessman to his core. He's not an ideologue, he's a business guy. He's looking at a great new trade deal. He keeps saying this. He wants it. Remember, Barack Obama, we were back of the queue. Donald Trump, front of the queue. This is great. He believes in Brexit. He believes in this country having a good deal with him. He's
not said we're front of the queue.
Well, actually, he has said that. He has said that. He has said we're front of the queue. He said it to me.
And he literally used those words?
He said it to me in the last interview I did last summer, on Air Force One. He did. He said we were front of the queue for a trade deal. Right? He considers Britain to be one of his most important countries in the world. And on the NHS, something happened in that little walk down where he changed his mind. But when we get in the room with them, he's going to say, OK, let's do a deal. What's on the table? Then it's down to us and our negotiating team. Now, part of the reason we're in this horrendous mess over Brexit is that we've had such terrible negotiators who've dug us into this appalling position we find ourselves. Donald Trump and his team are good negotiators. So when it comes to a trade deal with the Americans, let's put some damn good business people in there and let's do a good deal with them.
Toby, what's your feeling on this?
I would like to say that one of my concerns is that being the country that we are, detaching ourselves from Europe, becoming a minnow in a large pond, a country like the United States, they may want to do business with us, but actually, and Donald Trump is a businessman, but the difference between businessmen and humanists and politicians who are humanists are that they're just looking to get the best deal for them. And I'm very concerned that these deals that will now be happening are going to be stacked towards the giants, like the United States, and we would find ourselves exploited. Also, I'd like to say that I'm concerned about... I've experienced the American health system, and I really don't want to give up those things to these countries where people check your wallet at the side of the road to see if you've got health insurance before they agree to treat you.
Well,
totally
I mean, but Nikki, I mean, Toby has a point to me in terms of... I mean, Toby, you describe this Britain as a minnow compared to the juggernaut of the United States. And what about Annalise's point in terms of Theresa May not standing up for the NHS when she was next to Donald Trump?
OK, there are two remarkable things about this. Firstly is the Donald Trump interview with Piers Morgan, where Donald Trump actually managed to get a word in edgeways, which is unlike most of other people who are interviewed by Piers. And it was quite an interesting word.
Low blow for a fellow Morgan. That's really...
Yes, I've watched the Twitter feed about this. I keep hearing Morgan having a go at on the Twitter feed, and I keep thinking, oh, thank goodness, it's Piers Morgan they're having a go at, not me for once. So, look, the point about the NHS is that actually, to answer the serious question, this is a negotiation, and many people in this part of the world voted for Brexit. And what Brexit means is there are going to be trade agreements that are going to be done with other countries. But it's a negotiation. And actually what happened between them getting off from the podium and getting into the interview was that actually the Conservative government, particularly led by the Health Secretary, Matt Hancock, fought back immediately to make clear the NHS is not on the table. So by the time Donald Trump sat down, he had been told in no uncertain terms that under a Conservative government, the NHS is not going to be part of any trade negotiation.
So if Michael Gove were to become Tory leader, to become Prime Minister, are you guaranteeing then he would make no new deals regarding the NHS with the United States?
So this week I have been co-chairing or overseeing a series of hustings with all the Conservative leadership contenders. They were all asked about this and they all said the NHS is not up for sale.
That's a different... To be honest, it's not up for sale. I'm not even sure what that means. What I'm asking very specifically...
The answer is all the contenders said the NHS is not going to be part of the trade negotiations in relation to the US. And just to answer Annalise's point, the involvement of private providers in the NHS started under the Labour Party. That it was a Labour Health Secretary that oversaw the move of Hinchinbrook Hospital, not a million miles away from here, to private providers, and there's always been, and that's exactly what the Shadow Health Secretary has admitted.
But
so
Nikki,
the
difference is we've learned from that experience. And we've learned...
You've learned because you're in opposition. Yes, that's right.
No, not because we're in opposition. That is not the case, I'm afraid. It's not the case. We've learned that it's not delivered value for money and it hasn't improved patient outcomes and it should have stopped. And quite frankly, if you agree, then I would like to see more Conservative politicians challenging what's happening within the NHS at the moment.
We can have a separate debate about what we mean by private providers. GPs or charities, are we honestly saying we don't want something like Macmillan Cancer to be involved in the NHS? Because they are technically private providers. But going back to the original thing, well, exactly. So let's have a proper debate about these things.
Yes.
But let's have a proper debate about the NHS not being part of the trade negotiations. The NHS is a very precious thing. There will be other elements of trade negotiations. It's going to be a negotiation that is going to take a long time. These negotiations are, that's why I'm very sceptical about Brexit, but I am backing Michael Gove for the leadership, because actually somebody who wanted Brexit should be the person in the Prime Minister chair to deliver it.
Woman in the front.
Backtracking slightly, upon Annalise's point of Theresa May should have spoken up when Donald Trump mentioned about the NHS. But you just said it was wrong of Jeremy Corbyn to stand in front of thousands of people in London and protest what Donald Trump done. So why is it wrong of Theresa May to stand by and say
Annalise
nothing?
wasn't saying that Jeremy Corbyn was wrong to protest, not at all.
Did you not say?
No, she was supporting. She was definitely supporting her leader. I think that's fair to say.
Yeah, I think
Everybody else
he
was
was right
that.
to do that. He was right. And he was right to seek a meeting with him as well, which was sadly turned down. Yeah.
The woman there in the corner.
I'm a nurse in the NHS. I'm a community nurse. We already have a dreadful recruitment problem. Let's not make it any worse by involving Trump.
Yeah.
I think it's really quite a simple thing, really. I mean, there's something like, I think the NHS spends something like £120 billion a year, 18 billion of that's on pharmaceuticals. There is no doubt the Americans are going to want to get their mitts on some of that money. As you say, Piers, Trump is a businessman. He can see a deal. He is not going to be put off. And do not ever forget that when he says his bid is to make America great again, his aim is not to have free healthcare at the point of service for pensioners in this country or for children or for cancer patients. It is about what's right for America. And I completely take your point that everyone was falling over themselves, so that amongst the leadership hopefuls the other day, to say, oh, we wouldn't consider the NHS isn't on the table. I tell you what, if we're in a situation, and in particular a no-deal situation, somebody like Boris Johnson, he'd be selling his granny as well as the NHS.
Yeah. So, woman there.
I think what we're really worried about is that we've had years of really rubbish negotiation.
Yes.
And we don't want to we've lost faith in our government, and we're going to then see this negotiation fall through with Trump. And we don't want that. We want someone strong that's going to be able to negotiate properly with him.
Completely. This is the fundamental
But we
point.
haven't got that.
He's going to have a bunch of killers in that room. The best Goldman Sachs traders you've ever seen and so on, right? We need our own killers. The ones we didn't have in the room with the EU.
Drew,
well,
on the original question about Donald Trump and the NHS.
First of all, I think Nicky's really brave making promises that this Tory government can deliver anything at the moment. I don't think that's a real possibility at all. But Donald Trump is not the only person to say that the NHS is up for grabs. The American ambassador said that the NHS is up for grabs as well. And if anybody thinks that you can trust Donald Trump in a negotiation, his whole style is about winning the best deal for him, not for the partner. This isn't a partnership or a negotiation.
Well, what's wrong with that?
Well, because
why shouldn't he be putting America
NHS,
first?
especially in Scotland, is far too precious to be left at the hands of somebody like Trump and traded away just to allow...
Well, hang on, the NHS of Scotland under your tenure, the SNP, has not exactly been dancing off the rooftops, has it?
The NHS in Scotland
waiting lists have not... Waiting lists...
The
NHS in Scotland is the best performing NHS in the UK. It has the shortest... It has the best performance in accident and emergency. We have more doctors per head of... GPs per head of population than anywhere else in the UK.
You don't have failing waiting times. You don't have the worst record of youth mental health waiting times.
The NHS...
You don't have bed blocking crises. You don't have recruitment crises. Well, I'm putting things to you to point out that your own own tenure of running the NHS, actually, it may be better than down here. That's no great boast.
And Piers,
right?
you have to let him answer as well.
Yeah, Piers would say, notwithstanding that there are always issues in an NHS which is under pressure, Piers would say, as simply selling off the NHS to the best private bid he could get through Trump.
When did I say that?
Because that's what you've just said.
I believe in the NHS and we should protect it. I don't believe that.
Okay. This is in danger of turning into question time between you two. Okay. Riveting though that is, that's not particularly how I want this programme to go. We're going to move on, but before we do, I just wanted to say that question time comes from Brecon next week, and the following week we will be in Tottenham in North London. So go all... I'll get that right in a minute. Call 0330 123 9988 if you'd like to be in the audience. And go to the Question Time website. You can follow the instructions there. The details are up here. Right, let's move on from Trump. Just for a moment. Philip Waring.
Yes. Can I be right that 150,000 pensioners get to decide the next Prime Minister?
Yes.
Well, obviously we're talking about toilet leadership. I think, in fairness, the average age, as far as I'm able to ascertain, of the Conservative membership is something like 57. But when you're 55, that doesn't look that old, I have to say. Piers, go on, let's let you have a go at this.
Well, it's a really interesting question, isn't it? We don't know who these people are, but I would say the same thing applies to the Labour Party. One of the reasons the Labour Party can't get rid of Jeremy Corbyn, when so many of their own MPs want to, is because of the membership structure they set up just a few years ago.
Yeah, but can you answer the question, which is about the Conservative leadership?
I think it applies to both parties, is my point. But in relation to this, yeah, I think we should know who these people are, because they're going to have an enormous amount of sway over the fundamental decision. This leadership contest will be fought and won on one issue, Brexit. That's it. Nothing else is happening in this country right now. We can talk about the NHS, all these things. Nothing else is being discussed other than Brexit. And until that gets resolved, we're paralysed. So this leadership contest comes down to who's got the best Brexit plan. And the people that will ultimately decide who the leader will be making this critical decision, which 30-odd million people in this country voted over, it's 100-odd thousand people. We don't know who these people are. So, yes, I think it's a really interesting question. I think it should be perhaps public knowledge, who these people are, who the members are, and we can see whether there's any corruption. We can see whether there's any people that shouldn't be on that list. But at the moment, we're blind.
OK. I mean, Nikki, just coming to the point, I mean, how can the next Conservative leader have a mandate? Elected by 0.2% of the population, heading a minority government, surely there has to be a general election.
No, I don't think there absolutely should not be a general election, because what the country wants is Brexit to be delivered, and that's what the candidates are standing on. And so, to answer your question, the Conservative Party does not consist solely of pensioners. I am most definitely not a pensioner.
But it's not just that, it's the numbers. That's well, no,
of course, and it's the numbers and everything else. But the point is, in this country, we vote for a party, and we vote for that person, the person who is leader of that party becomes Prime Minister. So if that leader changes, as we saw with Tony Blair to Gordon Brown or Margaret Thatcher to John Major, then actually it's still the party that is in government. And the issue is, if the party retains the confidence, able to win a vote of confidence in the House of Commons, then it will carry on in government.
So if Labour were in a situation where they had one unelected Prime Minister and then another unelected Prime Minister, would you be sitting there saying, yes, that's fine?
Well, don't forget, Theresa May did, of course, go rather unhappily to the country in 2017 and come back being leader of the largest party, but obviously we didn't get a majority in the House of Commons. So she has been tested. We do have a general election coming in 2022, but we are facing a national crisis at the moment. I would disagree with Piers in sense of to say nothing else is happening is not correct, but clearly Brexit is the largest issue, and it is dominating Parliament, it's dominating public discussion. I asked you earlier on whether we had a question time in the last 6 months whether Brexit hadn't come up, and the answer seems to be no from the ones that I have seen. So we've got to get this resolved, and the country wants this to be resolved before we have a general election. That's critical.
Drew.
Well, this is a failed zombie government, and the leadership race that's within it at the moment is really a fight between who can deliver the hardest Brexit. Some have said they've got some ideas about doing fantasy renegotiations with the European Union. That's not going to happen. It's basically taking us up to a cliff edge. They should have been using this time, instead of going through this more internal fighting, which has been the same process for 3 years now throughout Brexit. They should have been going through this process to try and sort things out.